Hanuman sets out to find Sita. God is on one side of the ocean. The devotee is on the other side. She's imprisoned by a sense of ego. She's imprisoned by the senses. The ocean here is providing a metaphor. It's a vast gap that separates them. And this, of course, parallels the feelings of human beings, the idea that there's this chasm or this gap between God and mankind. Now, like a lot of people on this journey, the monkeys are going to realize that this vast ocean is there. And how are we ever going to be able to get across it? How can we get our way across this ocean? And they know that Sita has to be across the ocean. They know that she has to be there in Ravana's kingdom on the island of Lanka, because they've searched everywhere else that they possibly could search. So there's nowhere else she could be. She has to be there. But how are they going to get across that vast ocean? Well, Hanuman, as you recall, is not a self-conscious being. He's not an individual who remembers the great powers that he has. And so he's worrying and he's fretting right along with them. But one of the bears speaks up and reminds Hanuman that he's the son of Ravana. He's the son of the wind god. And as such, he's capable of altering his size and jumping across the ocean. So Hanuman is going to begin to grow. And he grows bigger and bigger and bigger to this massive, enormous size. And he climbs up to the top of a mountain. And acting on pure faith, he jumps across. When we see that ocean, we see there's such a massive chasm there. How are we going to get across it? And no one else can figure it out. Hanuman himself didn't know how to figure out how to do it until he was told that he had that ability. But once he knows, he's going to act without even thinking about it. This jump that he's taking from the mountaintop is symbolic of the idea of a leap of faith that all devotees are going to have to take. Hanuman doesn't just jump from the coastline, right? He's not standing on the beach and takes a leap and jumps across. He doesn't take the easy route. He climbs to the top of the tallest mountain there, and he jumps off of that mountain. If his faith and conviction is not strong enough, he's going to fall to his death. So he's putting that absolute sense of faith into everything that he does. Now, this talk of the leap of faith reminds us and takes us to the work of a fairly modern Western philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard. Hopefully you guys are somewhat familiar with him, but if not, I'm going to give you a little bit of background to help you understand the idea. Once I can get that to move. In a work called Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard, who is actually originally using the story of Abraham and Isaac as his example, he talks about these two figures. One he calls the night of infinite resignation, and the other one is the night of faith. Now, what an individual has to do is to be able to take that leap of faith, which is to let go of all of the things that keep us grounded in this world. Because as Kierkegaard explains it, to have the connection, the relationship, the bond to God, you can't do that based upon reason. You can't do that based upon written word. You can't do that upon anything physical or tangible in this world. Because God himself is a paradox. He is the absolute paradox. How can a being which is absolute and unchanging and perfect and eternal enter into time and still be all of those things? Time is limited, it's finite. So how can something that is eternal and absolute enter into the temporal without effectively destroying itself. Logically, this makes no sense whatsoever. But yet, the person of faith is going to be able to take that leap to where they let go of their senses, they let go of their connection, and they embrace it. Within the Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard uses the story of Don Quixote. Don Quixote is Cervantes' comic character, and he's a very old man who has, kind of gone through his life, and now he's in retirement, and he spends a lot of time reading these romantic stories of knights in shining armor and trying to overrun the evils of the world and so on. But he looks at the world itself in comparison to those stories, and he says, this isn't the way the world is. The world is wrong, because the people who are good and noble are frequently being hurt and undermined, and the people that do evil are the ones who are thriving and succeeding. This is wrong. So Don Quixote says, I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to become this great knight errant, and I'm going to fix the wrongs of the world. Well, of course, he's completely inept. He's completely incapable of being able to do this. But that was his vision. And he holds on to that vision. And within his own mind, he perceives himself as that great hero, righting the wrongs of the world, slaying dragons, and doing all of these other things. Now, the rest of the people who are watching him, they're laughing at him, they're pointing at him, they're making fun of him all the time, because, the man is just ridiculous. But within his own mind, he is that great hero. Well, that is an individual. Don Quixote represents the type of individual that Kierkegaard wants us to be. The type of individual who is not going to let things like common opinion of the masses or reason and logic prevent us from embracing the inner truth that we experience, the inner truth that we feel. And so, by that example, Don Quixote is just the type of person who could take that leap of faith, who could become that individual that lets go and doesn't care what anybody else thinks, but just simply lives their own personal truth. That's what a leap of faith requires. Now, in the text, Kierkegaard draws this distinction, as I said, between the knight, that should be knight of infinite resignation, and the knight of faith. The knight of infinite resignation is a person who does not really believe that all is right and possible with God. The knight is resigned to the Hegelian system, in which all must be explainable to be accepted. If something is absurd, then there's no objective validity to it, ergo it cannot be. To be the knight of infinite resignation, according to Kierkegaard, is the most horrible thing that you can be, because it means that you understand what you have to do, which is to let go of that connection that we have to the materialistic, realistic world, and make that leap of faith. But you can't bring yourself to do it. Just like Hegel and his followers, they are bound firmly to the world that we live in. If I can't prove it, it's not true. Right? I've got to have proof before I'll believe anything. And how can I believe an absolute paradox? It can't be done. So to be that knight of infinite resignation means that you know what you have to do, but you can't bring yourself to do it. And that makes it the worst thing you could be. But by contrast, we have the knight of faith. The knight of faith recognizes the absurd, which through a leap of faith he grasps. The knight of faith is not somebody who stands out in a crowd. He simply recognizes the impossibility presented, and in that instant he embraces the absurd. The knight of faith makes the ultimate leap of faith which completely leaves behind the objective world, the objective reality, leaves it behind us. And he exchanges it for nothing but pure faith. And so that person, according to Kierkegaard, that wants the relationship with the divine, has to throw away anything that might link them or connect them to this materially grounded world. They have to throw away that connection to pure reason in order to take the leap that allows them to embrace something that from a rational standpoint is completely and utterly absurd. Something that makes zero sense, seems impossible beyond belief, but yet something that we have to embrace. The absolute paradox, again, is the notion that God, an eternal being, can enter into time and join with the temporal without destroying itself. Logically, the idea is absurd. However, to accept Christ or to accept Abraham, which Kierkegaard refers to as a God-man, sort of a combination of the divine and the human, we have to accept this as possible, hence the leap of faith. It's much like the scene, little picture that you have there, which is taken from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Within that film, Indiana Jones is tracing the route of the Holy Grail. He's looking for the Holy Grail, and he comes across this huge chasm. It's far too deep to climb down one side on a rope and back up the other. It's too far across to jump. There seems to be no possible way to get across. But yet he's following a script that says that you have to take a leap of faith. And so what that meant was that he literally had to walk out into the void, step right off the edge, and believe that somehow he's going to be upheld. Even though all common sense and all reason says this is impossible, you're going to fall to your death. He believes firmly that he's going to be upheld because of that. And sure enough, he discovers that there is, though hidden from perception, there is a walkway to where he can walk straight across to the other side. But without taking that jump, without taking that leap of faith, he would have never gotten across. And this is the idea that we're taking from Hanuman. Hanuman is taking that leap. When he jumps from the top of the mountain, he's saying, look, I'm putting my complete faith in this. Because if my faith isn't strong enough, if I don't believe, what's going to happen? I'm going to plummet to my death. But by having that full sense of faith, he not only is able to, jump from the top of that mountain and survive, but he flies across the ocean. And so that vast ocean that's so mighty is nothing compared to him. Hanuman begins, when he gets over to Lanka, he begins to search the city. But then he realizes that Sita is never going to be willing to stay in one of Ravana's palaces. After a while, he hears somebody off to the side chanting Ram's name in the middle of the night, and right in the middle of this demon stronghold. So he goes to investigate, and he discovers that Vibhishan is there. You remember Vibhishan was one of the three brothers, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishan. He was the good demon, the one that asked to keep Dharma alive, that he never be allowed to forget Dharma. He is our sense of conscience. And so here he is, right there in the middle of his brother's kingdom, right there with all these demons around, but he is sitting there chanting the name of Ram. And Vibhishan says, I live here like the tongue in the middle of the teeth. Amidst all of this evil, I try to keep Ram's name upon my tongue, in the heart and in the mind. Vibhishan has no real power in Ravana's kingdom, but he's there and he serves as a sort of silent witness of what's right and what's wrong. he plays that role of a sense of consciousness, of conscience, to help us to see. He becomes that guide to show us here is what is right from here is what is wrong. And so, wanting to help, Vibhishan is going to tell Hanuman where he can go to find Sita. And so off Hanuman goes, making his way towards the Ashoka Grove where Sita is sitting. Now, Sita is in this Ashoka Grove, and most of the time is surrounded by these Rakshashis, these female demons that are guarding her. And so Hanuman is going to hide up in a tree. He's going to watch Sita for a while. He's going to just look down upon her and see what's going on. And he discovers that Sita is in a terrible state. She's depressed, she's sad, and she's praying for help. And as Hanuman is watching, he sees Ravana come out towards her. Every morning, Ravana comes out to her and tries to convince Sita to come into his palace, to come into his bed. He says, look, you're out here in this grove of trees. You're sitting outside. You have no comfort. Why don't you come into my palace? Why don't you allow my servants to take care of you? Why don't you allow me to take care of you? He's trying to lure her, trying to tempt her into his bed. And she is always constantly refusing. And so Ravana at this point threatens her and says, look, I'm being as patient as I can, but if you don't agree soon, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to make you into food. But still, Sita refuses Ravana's advances, and Ravana returns to his palace. The Rakshashis all go about their duty, and they leave Sita there sitting alone, at least for the time being.